Hello, this is Ben, and I'm going to be um, describing a field service app that I've created. Just a really quick and dirty little thing that allows you to enter data and remember that data. It basically is meant to show you guys how to do multiple activities and switch between those activities, and how to basically create a shared class that holds data in it. It doesn't actually save data between uses of the application, but that's something we'll look at in the next video. So the main idea here is that we will create an app that allows you to view entries of a field service agent that's handing out sales material. So if I click on view entries, I can see how many were entered before. 6 pamphlets, 14 CDs, and 69 pens were handed out. And if I want to enter for today's, for example, if I do it today again, I could go back here and enter 3. It gives me this nice kind of drop down of entry here, and say there's 36 pens handed out. And then I hit submit, and then I can go back and I can go to view entries, and I can see the number of entries that were added or that were done today. Of course, if I wanted to add to this, I could just simply do a plus equals instead of an equals. I'm currently doing just a direct equals, setting this to the values here. So this isn't a running total, it's more of just a daily total. And you can see I can keep going back to view entries and enter data, and the view entries is maintained. So that is that. It's a pretty simple app, but it does have 3 different views, and we're going to go over what those views are all about here today. So this is my field service app, and basically I've added one new drawable. I'm going to go over each of these directories in turn. I've added one new drawable, which is just a goofy little background I got off the web. You can add whatever you want in here, and I just did add existing to get that. I did the layouts next, which basically helped guide me through the rest of the project. And for the layouts, what I've got is I've got a main AXML, which basically it has the background and it has the 2 buttons, the view entries and the enter data. Now, I had a little bit of trouble getting this. I couldn't remember the syntax for getting the background to work here in main, but I did get that working. Excuse me, coming down with something here. And I can show you how that actually works. It's just a background. The widget property comes up automatically. If you go to style, you can just select the file name that's being included here, and you're going to select background for that PNG. In source code, it looks like this: Android background, drawable background, right there. The next thing I did was I wanted to create 2 buttons, and this was very simple to do because basically I could just literally drag the buttons over here and create them, because I want them one on top of each other, which the linear layout is very good at doing. So I created this button here, the view entries button, and then I created the enter data button down here. The next view that I did was the one called view, which basically just views our data. So there's pamphlets, CDs, and pens, and they all start out at 0. For this one, I actually had to do kind of what I did before with the layout, where I basically create a structure for the layout. So the linear layout starts, and that's a vertical layout, but then inside each one of these is a horizontal layout. So for example, the pamphlet 0, this piece here is a horizontal layout, this is a horizontal, this is a horizontal, and this whole thing is a vertical. So the horizontal layout has the pamphlets label, which just says the word pamphlets, and then it has the pamphlets output, which is going to show the current number of pamphlets that have been handed out. And then we've got another one for CDs. So these are the CDs that were handed out. CDs output is given there. And then another one finally for the pens. And the pens are handed out here, the total amount handed out there. So you can sort of take some time to copy that down. The basic structure is what I did was I took, once I had one complete, I took and copied and pasted this below and just changed the names from, for example, pamphlets area to CDs area, and then to the CDs output and the CDs label, for example. And then I did the same with the pens. Other problems I ran across that I should let you be aware of is if you want this to line up correctly, you kind of have to move these around a little bit. As you can see, the pens is a smaller area so that it lines up, the zeros line up here. If I wanted to play around a little bit more, I could actually put these kind of like centered. I didn't bother doing that. The other thing is that there's a padding in here inherent in this, which is, well, the margin actually. The margin from the right here is 35.8 dp for the pens. Here it is. Margin for the top for the CDs is 16.7 dp. And that essentially gives us that room up top. And the layout height is 5 dp for the overall fill. So that's how the view works. And what we're going to be doing eventually is remember, we'll be getting the named field here, which in this case is named, pamphlets output. We'll be getting that and populating that with with something, basically, with, in this case, the number of pamphlets that have been handed out and entered on the enter AXML. So speaking of that, the next thing we got to look at is the entry, which basically takes 3 different numbers. And actually, it treats all these as strings. So that's just sort of the way the edit text widget works. So I've added basically a pamphlets layout, a CDs layout, and a pens layout, all located within the field service overall layout. So that overall layout is here, the new layout, and this is vertical, and then there's a horizontal one. And in this case, we have a text view for the pamphlets and an editable text region called edit text for the part which is going to edit the number of pamphlets that have been handed out, and we call that edit text pamphlets. And then basically we do that same kind of pattern throughout. We replicate that again for the CDs. Edit text CDs here. And we do that yet again for the pens. Edit text pens. And then one more time. Actually, this next one is a button. So this button, basically what the design that I came up with is, you'd edit in each of these, you'd throw them in there, and then you'd hit one overall submit button, which submits all of these to the, in this case we're going to use a singleton to record all of that. And so that's it for the views. The next thing to kind of talk about here is the main activity.cs and what that has to do. So main activity CS is a really easy one. Basically, you've just got 2 buttons, and like before, we're going to create a delegate for our button click. In this case, what we want to do is actually start up a new activity if that button is clicked. So we use this function called start activity, and what we have to do is, in this case, we want it to go to view entries, which I've created, which I will be about to create below. And in this case, if it's clicking the other button, button 2, which is the button for editing entries, I want to go to the enter data view. Next thing I did was I went up to field service, I hit add, and I said new file, and I basically added 2 new CS files. I added enter data and view entries.cs. So first of all, looking at view entries CS, even before I got to the reset counters, the first things I did was I created a onCreate, which basically does a set content view to resource layout.view. That goes into, this has to correspond to this AXML file. So resource.layout.view, and when you're typing this, the possibilities will pop up and you'll see view there, and that's how you know that you've succeeded in getting the right named layout. And then we do a reset counters, and reset counters I'll get back to. I'm not going to describe that yet because that's going to be a little bit confusing for now. I also created an on start so that later we can reset those counters as well. Enter data basically needs to be able to track the data, so the delegate is going to be a good time to talk about the tracker, because basically what's going to happen is it's going to find all of these edit settings, so edit text CDs, edit text pamphlets, edit text pens. It's going to find each of these, and when it finds those, it's going to create, that's going to be the edit text entry, and then it's also going to find the button for button submit. When button submit is clicked, we want to take whatever was in those fields, those edit text fields, which correspond to what's in the layout, remember. So in the layout we had defined edit text pens, edit text CDs, and somewhere edit text pamphlets. So all of that is down here, and we find that using resource.id.editTextCDs, edit text pamphlets, etc. When button is clicked, that's the submit button, we get the value of those and we stuff them in this tracker thing. So the tracker is another new class that I made, and then I just put a right line down here. The tracker is a singleton. Remember our terminology from C# classes. A singleton means it's one instance of a thing. Basically, it can only ever be one instance. So I wanted this to kind of be one shared instance that can be shared between the two activities, so that they don't have to be passing objects back and forth, and which you can do as well, but it just complicates things a little bit, and I wanted to keep this kind of simple. This is meant to be a very simple tutorial for you guys for getting started out. The previous two tutorials we did were just kind of hello world apps. This one actually does something. The next one we'll do something a little more, and we'll keep getting a little more complex each and every time we look at Xamarin tutorials. So what I did with tracker, basically this just holds 3 strings that are going to change over time, and I created properties for these. A property being something that has a get and set method and is private inside of the class itself. In this case it's a singleton with properties. And I'm going to set the pamphlets, CDs, and pens initially to the string 0, which will set them as empty initially. Now, when I do a set on these, I'm going to set it to the value that's coming in. I put in a debug line here to see what my pamphlets count was, because I was working on debugging something, but otherwise I just return the lowercase pamphlets, which is actually the private variable setting for pamphlets, and I just return that. Then I do the same with CDs. I just return that, set it here, and pens, and I return that and set it there. And that's basically about it. The view entries will take from each of those. This is what the reset counters thing was all about. It basically finds each of those text views, and then what it does is it goes to the tracker and it says .cds. So this text in the CD's output, which remember that corresponds to the view's CD output, which is here, which is called CD's output. So you see this being called CD's output here, and then if you go to the view, you see it being called CD's output here. So those things correspond to each other in the same way that pamphlets output. For example, if you go to view and you click on the pamphlets output thing, you see pamphlets output, and that corresponds as well to pamphlets output here. And so we get each of those. Once we have them, we set the text value for these. You can't just set it directly. You have to set the .text on it, because CD's output is a text view. And so if you hit dot, it gives you all the different things you can do on it. And in this case, I'm going to set the text on it, and I'm going to set it equal to tracker.cds, and then tracker.pamphlets and tracker.pens. I created a helper function, this is known as, which is a private because I noticed that I was copying and pasting this chunk of code from line 19 to line 24 into both the onCreate and the onStart. OnStart happens after activity is resumed. OnCreate happens when it's first made. So I need to put this reset counters in each of these. And then basically we get what we see here with just being able to view these entries, being able to go back into enter data and set more data. And hitting submit, and then going back, viewing that, and we see the corrected entries in here. So that's basically it. That's the whole app. Kind of a really easy app to get us started with actual apps. Your app mini project, the first one is going to be something kind of fairly similar to that. Actually, I don't have it up right now, do I? Yeah, I don't have it up right now. But it's going to be something pretty similar to that, so hopefully you paid attention there and are able to at least replicate some of that stuff, because that's going to be the first thing that you need to do for the app portion of the course. Next thing I'm going to show is something called Tasky. Tasky is a starter application that Xamarin has put together, kind of a tutorial, and I'm just going to go through that and explain it. Alright, see you soon.